Good evening, Jai Krishna. How's everything?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, nice to see you.
Likewise, how's everything in the Caribbean?
It's a lacking association. Thankfully, I got you on Wednesday night, Hanuman Swami on Tuesday night, and the Gayatri on Monday night. So there's my association.
Thank God for Zoom, right?
Oh, you got that right, brother. Uh,
Hey, Sid, Hare Krishna. All right, so let us begin with the invocation mantras so we can all meditate deeply on the teacher or teachers who have and continue to illuminate our path. These mantras are an absorption, a demonstration of our gratitude and respect for those who are leading us towards enlightenment. So, we'll begin. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuro Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jeno Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Didati Swapadantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanto Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Vastyatade Shitarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Gaur Mukta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. So we are continuing our journey through Bhagavad Gita, and we finished chapter 13. We are now on chapter 14. Thank you. And chapter 14 is a very powerful chapter. It talks about the three modes of material nature. And to simplify that, we've spoken earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, maybe for those of you who are new to our discussions, or are totally unfamiliar with the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, which is a universally applicable philosophy, no matter what yoga system, what religion, whatever your belief system is. The universality and applicability of the Bhagavad Gita is what has kept it not only alive, but increased interest over the centuries. Right now, just the translation of my teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's Gita, it's called Bhagavad Gita as it is translated into over 120 languages. Gives you an idea of that wouldn't be translated unless there was interest, from the various cultures, countries, and peoples around the world. So the Bhagavad Gita has this universality that can touch anyone's heart, as long the only qualification that is expressed by Rupa Goswami, one of the previous teachers, spiritual masters of our bhakti lineage, bhakti yoga lineage, is you don't have to be knowledgeable, you don't have to be a renunciate, all you have to be is sincere, because by virtue of one's sincerity to know the truth, one receives the truth. One becomes a recipient of the truth. It's just a matter of having that sincerity. And another way to describe sincerity is honesty. Just the realization that, this world has caused a lot of suffering in my life and in the life of most people, if not all people, and the fact that we do not enjoy suffering. So it's not that we're left afloat, adrift in the ocean, but the Gita is specifically a discipline or a strategy which is given to humanity so that we have that opportunity to realize our highest potential. And our highest potential, everyone may have a relative high potential. In other words, maybe I want to be super healthy, that's why I practice yoga, or maybe I want to be monetarily successful. There's so many potentials that we have, so many ambitions that we have. But according to the Gita, the highest potential is the realization of the absolute truth. The absolute truth means that which is eternal, that which is constant, not changing, constantly changing. So for one to want to know, have that desire to know, have that sincerity and honesty to admit that I need to find my path, and in order to find my path, I need help. And help comes when one is reaching out for that help. Quite often, there are many different types of manifestations for someone who needs help. Sometimes a person will become very angry and belligerent and challenging. It is understood that there are many ways that a person reaches out for help. So this extension of oneself for clarity of perspective as to what is the truth. What is another way to describe the truth is what is the purpose of our existence? That's another way to describe what is the absolute truth. Understanding fully the goal and purpose of our existence. So this chapter 14 gives us an inclination. I'm going to read something here, which kind of puts chapter 14 into perspective. And I'm going to get my notes here too, so that, there we go. Yes. So last chapter, the key verse connecting chapter 13 to chapter 14 was the 13th chapter, last verse, the 22nd verse, which read, the living entity in material nature follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil amongst various species. So while chapter 13 described the soul, this pure spirit soul, which accordingly is our true nature, to understand that we are pure soul, true nature, then chapter 13 described how that soul, which is purely spiritual by nature, comes in contact with this energy, which is temporary, and which is described as prakriti in Sanskrit, which means the material energy, or that which is constantly in flux, constantly changing. So chapter 13 described that there is a distinction between what is in the body, which motivates the body, and the body itself. In another verse in the Gita, it's described that yantra rudhani mayaya, that this body is a machine made of material energy. So according to the Gita, what is described in the Gita, that the soul is not the machine, but the soul is the driver of the machine. Just like you may have a car, a nice car sitting outside. You and the car are separate and distinct. While you're in the car, it may be one in terms of the relationship. You are the driver of the car. And where you want to go, that's where the car goes. So Gita says the body and the mind, just like a car, especially the new cars, they have sensors for everything. So the body has a mind, and the mind is also material energy. The mind is made of a subtle material energy, body made of a gross material energy. Earth, water, fire, air, and ether are the basic components of the body. And the mind's basic components, there's three subtle energies: mind, intelligence, and ego. So the mind is a recipient of sensory input. Whatever we look at, whatever we listen to, whatever we smell, we touch, we taste, etc. The mind is a recipient of that sensory input, and it does all kinds of things with it. Stores it, catalogs, it's memory. Gokula, yeah. It does a number of things. Intelligence, on the other hand, is discernment. This is what we can see good and bad. We can discern different things. It's a subtler dimension of the mind, but it is also material energy intelligence. And then there's ego. And ego means identity. And the two aspects of identity is I am. So I am white, therefore Caucasian, male, 73 years old, et cetera, et cetera. You see, I have all these designations which are part of the ego or the identity and that which I identify with. So those three elements are subtle, mind. As I said, all the sensory input goes to the mind, remembers it, draws it out when need be. The intelligence, the subtle energy, which is discernment, that which we can make distinction between all of these different things are there. So, and then ego means identity, what we identify with. And the Sanskrit word for identity or ego is ahankara, which means false ego. It really means misidentification. We are identifying with the temporary dimension. And according to Gita, truth means that which has no cessation. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is describing truth, he describes truth as that which has no cessation, and illusion, that which has no duration. So what has no duration in terms of our existence? What doesn't last and last and last? The body. The body has a shelf life. It could be 70, it could be 80, it could be 90, etc. So according to Gita, the body and the mind have no real duration. They are born into this world, they grow, the body and mind grow and develop, eventually at a certain juncture begins to deteriorate, diminish, and ultimately there's death. That is not the ultimate truth that the Gita is pointing us towards. Gita is pointing us towards the soul, because the soul has no cessation, according to the Gita. Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time, in speaking to Arjuna, never was there a time where I do not exist, Krishna, you Arjuna, all the kings on the battlefield, all living entities, anything that shows the symptoms of life always exist. And just as the body changes from boyhood to youth, youth to middle age to old age ultimately to death, as those changing, we exist during the changes of our body. Like when you probably have pictures of yourself as a baby, pictures of yourself at 5, 6, 7 years old, pictures of yourself at 20, pictures of yourself at 40. And depending how old you are, I don't want to expose anybody's age or go beyond. But the thing is, you're there, you're present in those changes. So what Krishna says is in one verse, and then he says, we exist eternally. And in the next verse, he says, just as you exist, you, the soul, exist in the changing bodies, the changing forms that you go through in the course of life, you also exist at the time when the body, which has no duration, dies. That change is there. So what has no duration? That is not us in reality. What has no cessation? That is the soul. The soul doesn't die. The soul eternally exists, according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and according to other sacred texts are out there, the Sankhya, Sharirika, and Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and so many different the Upanishads, and that's just within the Vedic paradigm. I'm sure if you read in Christianity or Judaism or Islam, there will be similar references that the soul is eternal by nature. So 13 describes the soul. How does the soul get into the situation that we're in right now? How are we enveloped within another energy, another format, which is the material energy? How and why does that all happen? So the 14th chapter gets into when that does happen. It doesn't answer why it happens, but when it does happen, what is the interrelationship or the interaction between those two basic components? Prakriti, the material energy, and Purusha, the spiritual energy or the soul. How do those two interact? And what causes one person to have zero interest in spirituality? Like you're all here. You're spending your Wednesday evening, an hour of your Wednesday evening with me. Why? Why are you doing that? Other people, vast majority of the United States, they're either watching TV or going to a sporting event or doing something other than inquiry into what is my true nature. So why does the soul, if according to Gita, its true nature is spiritual, why do out of 8 billion souls that inhabit just this planet alone, and of course, according to the Vedas, there are other planets with life also, even though our science, material science, cannot verify that or understand that as of yet. According to the Vedic sciences, there are millions of planets with millions and millions of species of life. But the question is, 8 billion souls, why is there such a poor interest, such a lack of interest in spirituality? And that can be explained and understood if we understand the gunas. So what are the gunas? What are the modes? The English term of gunas is modes of material nature. The Sanskrit word gunas can be translated as the ropes that bind us. It can also be translated as the fortress or the prison that we're in. So there are, different definitions, but the ropes that bind us, or the force of influence that this particular Prakriti or the material energy, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, Prakriti, the force of influence that has, that's referred to as gunas. So the gunas are everywhere where there's material energy. So everywhere in this universe is material energy. Therefore, the presence of the gunas are everywhere in this universe. So that is to be understood. Just like if you have a sheet that's made out of cotton or silk, and you have threads within that sheet, where are there not threads in the sheet? Everywhere there are threads in the sheet. Every corner, every side, the center part, all contain threads. So that is wherever there is the material energy, its force of power, its force of influence, the modes of material nature, the gunas are there. So again, how do the gunas, what do they look like? What do they feel like? How do they manifest? How are we able to identify them? Because they are identifiable according to the Gita. The Gita gives us many ways by which we can identify the influence of the gunas, because it's the influence of the gunas that gives us our psychological makeup and also gives us our inclinations. So when I say the gunas gives us our inclinations, some people are inclined to drink excessively. Some people are inclined to drink socially. Some people are inclined to maybe have, it's not a big deal, maybe have a drink here, a drink there. I'm talking about alcohol when I say drink. And some people are not inclined to drink at all. And so the inclination goes on and on and on, what you're inclined to, what you're not inclined to, and why. So when we talk about the gunas, 3 gunas in particular, and the metaphor that is quite often used is color. There are, how many primary colors are there? Who can tell me? How many primary colors are there?
Black,
Green.
white.
It's
Not
yellow, blue, red.
yellow, blue, red. Thank you, Irina. Those are considered 3 primary colors. Where do we get all the other shades of color? If we have 3 primary colors,
Mix of 3.
go ahead.
Mix of 3.
Yes.
Mix of 3.
You mix the 3 in various proportions. And then what happens when you mix blue and yellow? You get what color? Irina.
Green.
Yes.
Blue.
What happened?
Blue and yellow, green.
Yeah, right. And what happens when you...
I'm makeup artist.
So when you
I
mix the
mix
colors, yeah. If you're an artist, you know, you have to be aware of the mixture. So when you have blue and green and you mix it in equal proportions, you get 1 shade of green. Then if you change proportions, you put more yellow, then you'll get a different shade of green, or more green, you'll get a different shade of yellow. So then you mix blue and red, and what do you get? Purple.
Purple.
And you mix, yeah, and when you mix red and yellow, what do you get? You get orange. So all these different...
Rose. Oh, orange.
Yeah. Yeah, so these 3 primary shades mixing in various proportions gives us different hues, the various hues of the rainbow. Okay? So that is the metaphor that is there in the Vedas. The 3 primary gunas are sattva guna, which means goodness, rajas guna, which means passion, loosely described as passion or action, that which inclines us towards action. And then tamas. Tamas means ignorance, or that which inclines us towards inaction, laziness. So sattva is, or goodness, is predominantly in an individual. When it's predominantly in an individual, there's clarity of perspective, lucidity or clarity, clearness. We can see things as they are. There's tranquility, wisdom, the power of discrimination, the inclination towards detachment, happiness, and peacefulness. So when sattva gun, or goodness, is in our lives predominantly, then we experience these things. But you know what the problem is? The problem is the gunas are always competing for prominence. It's not like you get into sattva gun and you're cool, everything's fine. No, rajagun, because rajagun means action, and we have to act. So rajagun is there in us, otherwise we wouldn't act. But when it vies for prominence, then the qualities of rajagun manifest in our character, in our psychology. It means action. Rajas is predominant, then there's hankering. So when action grows, the desire to be active grows, there's hankering. Does everyone know what hankering means? It means I want, I desire, I hanker. So there's a predominance of hankering. There is also attachment. What do we say in goodness? There's an inclination, psychological inclination towards detachment, which means you're really not trying to get things for yourself. But in Rajagun, when Rajagun is there, ambition is there, attachment is there, hankering is there, energetic endeavor is there, passion. Passion means desire, power, the hankering for power, restlessness, and creativity, creative action are all there. Now, when we are functioning in this world, do we have to be active? And the answer is yes. So Rajagun is going to be there to a degree. So in yoga, what is the goal? The goal in yoga is to have a strong prominence of sattva gun by living a life that is sattvic. When you study Ayurveda, or when you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, what are two things that the Ayurvedic doctor recommend almost immediately? It doesn't depend what your illness is. The two things are lifestyle and diet. Those are the two things Ayurvedic doctors recommend. Now, in terms of the philosophy of Gita and in relationship to the gunas, the same thing. What we eat and the lifestyle that we live will put us in, will create an environment, an internal environment, which is conducive to a prominence of sattva gun. Not that it totally eradicates rajagun, because you need to be active. Because sometimes people say, well, if I'm sattva gun, I'm just going to sit there all day and meditate. And how will the world, I've heard this, people say this to me, how will the world go on? How will I support my family, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, but when there's a prominence of sattva gun due to lifestyle, the orchestration of lifestyle in a particular way, the proper control of diet, meditation, of course, meditation can be under the general category of lifestyle. That will keep sattva gun and its presence and its inclinations towards wisdom, towards discrimination, proper discrimination, towards peacefulness, etc. The inclination will be there. When rajagun predominates, then there's action and all the results of wanting to be action and energetic and restless and all those things which are the prominent qualities. It will give us our prominent inclination. And what's tamas gun? Tama means ignorance or not not having the ability to see things as they are. And it manifests, and it's the least favorable situation to be in to practice yoga. In other words, if you are influenced predominantly by tamagun or ignorance, there is not an inclination for yoga. Because what is yoga? Yoga means to control one's senses. Yogas chitta vritti narodaha. That you control your senses so that you reach the state of narodaha, peacefulness, calmness, stillness. So tamagun is as follows. What's prominent in tamagun is ignorance, not seeing things clearly, not seeing things as they are. Delusion. Delusion means I'm always dreaming about doing something but never doing it. That's part of our deluded position. Oh, I want to be, like sometimes kids on the basketball court. I want to be Michael Jordan or this basketball player or that basketball player. But the work, the endeavor that goes into having that level of competency in a particular sport, in anything, a musician. Oh, I want to be, the best guitarist in the world, Jeff Beck or, Joe Bonamassa, or you name your favorite guitarist. Yeah, but then you realize the endeavor. I see this. I see this a lot. My son is very musical by nature. But kids, especially when they're 8 and 9 years old, they don't have the drive or determination to practice. But when you read the biographies of people who have achieved great things materially, you see what they put into it in order to achieve that goal, whether they're artists or musicians or academic or sports figure, whatever if they're going to be a doctor, if they're going to be a lawyer, if they really separate themselves from the pack, it's the endeavor that they put into that effort. So in tamagun, we don't really have that drive. Laziness is a manifestation of tamagun. Delusion, as I said, disinterest, lethargy. You may talk a big game, but really, do you have the drive, the determination to do it? That's the influence of tamagun, or ignorance. Sleep, not inclined to accomplish things, not inclined towards constructive activity. In fact, when one is influenced by tamagun, and one of the biggest influences, the biggest causes of tamagun is intoxication. That's why in yoga, it's described that, in order to be a yogi, you should be free from intoxication, because intoxication makes one disinclined for achievement of higher goals. It puts one in a dream state, in a deluded state, in a lethargic state, in a disinterested state. So those are the prominent qualities of the 3 modes of material nature. And we can analyze our own life and see what is the obstacle in my life that I have to overcome. Is it lethargy, procrastination, disinterest, disinclination? Or am I always a doer, doing, and not having the ability, the control to be, to always do. I always want to accomplish, I want to achieve, etc. Now, we're talking about the influence of the gunas. There is another state, which is called Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness, which doesn't have the influence of Rajas and Tamas. In that state of Shuddha Sattva, where there's no Rajas and no Tamas, then there can be inclination to achieve certain things, but they are as an offering to God. So there is a misunderstanding that when I take to yoga, serious practice of yoga, then I just renounce everything. But in terms of bhakti, no, we do everything, but the results of our action is not for our own benefit, our own enjoyment, but it's to make it, to have a nice offering to the Supreme, to God. So it's not that Rajagun, we have to be active, but we also have to be in control of our action. And the control of the action comes by being situated in Sattvagun. Sattvagun gives us the control. It's the control lever. Because why? In Sattvagun, you have wisdom. In Sattvagun, you have the power of discrimination, which means you know when to stop doing and when to start being. You know, you make that break off rather than getting sucked into the vortex of constant action, constant achievement, constant ambition. You know how to turn it off and when to turn it off. So this is why in yoga, whatever yoga system you're looking at, one of the things in yoga is to cultivate a sattvic mind. Because that element, the various elements like earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, those elements have a prominence of the gunas in them. Like I said, I used the analogy of the strands of a sheet being everywhere within the sheet, and the gunas being everywhere within our existence and beyond our existence. So the mind is predominantly made of sattva, and earth and all those, they are they contain the heavier. Fire has more rajas in it. Earth has more tamas in it. Like that. So that gives us a hint at how to structure our lifestyle. A lifestyle based on balance. Krishna says that clearly in the 6th chapter. One cannot be a yogi if he eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or sleeps too little. All of these things that we are to do when we are cultivating yoga, when we are infusing our minds with sattva gun, then the inclination will be towards balance. And when we get out of balance, as it may happen, when we get out of balance, we have the presence of mind to realize, hey, I'm getting out of balance here. And the presence of mind and the ability, the wisdom and the discriminative powers to see what is causing the imbalance and then to rectify that, to make the change, maybe in our lifestyle. Like sometimes people work way too much. They just get absorbed or attached and the work, and it becomes all consuming. To work is fine. To make money is fine. But to find that balance where the priority of your life is in cultivating, doing activities, arranging your lifestyle and your diet and your association. Association, what do they say? Birds of a feather flock together. Who you associate with will also help you in the cultivation of your sattva gun. If you associate with people who like to party, I remember when I first got into bhakti yoga, and this was 1971 when I first got into bhakti yoga, and I started following the principles of bhakti. I gave up all intoxications. I became a strict vegetarian. I gave up all intoxications, all of these things. Then I noticed that I began to lose friends because, that was their lifestyle. And I was changing my lifestyle to be more sattvic. And because if you're absorbed in a tamasic or rajasic lifestyle, you're not inclined to sattvic activities. You don't see where do you get any happiness if you don't drink, if you don't eat meat, if you don't do all of these things that are more towards the rajasic, the passion or the ignorance state of your existence? Where do you experience happiness? But what is one of the manifestations of sattva gun? Happiness is one of the manifestations. And it's a different type, it's a different quality of happiness. Whereas in rajagun, passion, happiness is quick, really quick. It's like a spark. In tamagun, happiness is in ignorance. But in sattvagun, happiness is more steady, more consistent in your life. It's what you get out of the meditation. It's what you get out of healthy lifestyle. Sometimes people can't understand how you can be a vegetarian. But when you realize, once you're a vegetarian for a longer period of time, and you realize the consistency and stability in your health is a side effect of having a sattvic lifestyle, which incorporates a healthy eating. Your health becomes consistently good. And even if you do get sick, your ability to rebound, to get well quicker, that is there also. We see that. So the sattva gun and the cultivation of that, you can't get to Shuddha sattva, pure goodness, unless you first cultivate sattva gun and bring it to the prominent point of life. And that will require lifestyle change, dietary change, association change, or maybe you are already doing that. An involvement of a state of beingness, which comes in meditation, rather than a constant state of doingness. All of these things will contribute, will be the contributing factor in creating an internal and external environment that will facilitate yoga and facilitate your positive inclinations rather than negative inclinations which are destructive or detrimental to either your physical, your psychological, your emotional, or intellectual well-being. When we begin to get a taste, and Krishna uses that analogy in the Bhagavad Gita, he describes that when you get a taste for param drishtva nivartate, for the higher things, meaning initially sattvic things, and then ultimately the Shuddha sattvic things. But so Krishna says, when you get a taste for the higher things, the sattvic things, and the ultimately Shuddha sattvic things, you lose a taste for the lower things, the debilitating things, those things which are detrimental to your well-being. So it really means it's our responsibility. You can't place a blame on any other thing other than your own commitment. Sometimes people think it's enough to commit to going to the yoga studio, a couple of times a week and doing asana. But yoga means a much deeper, much more profound commitment to your achieving the highest potential that you can possibly achieve while inhabiting this human form of life. And according to Gita, preliminarily, it's full self-realization, and then ultimately, primarily, entering into a state of pure, loving relationship with the Supreme. But that won't happen unless and until, number one, we understand the workings of the modes of material nature. And Krishna is quite explicit, and he elaborately describes what work looks like when it's predominantly influenced by sattva-gun, rajagun, or tamagun. What does it look like? What does knowledge and goodness look like? What does knowledge and passion look like? What does knowledge and ignorance look like? And he goes through, what does action and goodness look like? What does action and rajas or passion look like? What does action look like in ignorance? And he elaborately describes knowledge, action, work, religion. What is religion? Like people say, well, why are all these religions? Why? Because they appeal to where a person is at psychologically, and may appeal a particular, I don't want to get into bad-mouthing any religions, but it may appeal specifically to a certain tamasic or rajasic mindset. And the propounder of that religion may come from that culture, or may be divinely sent to reach people on that level and to try to uplift them by instilling within them some discipline, some positive restrictions, so that they can, lifestyle restrictions, so that they can make advancement to the higher modes of material nature. So these are important things to do, and we'll study in the 14th chapter. We'll go on, analyzing this. Also in the 18th chapter, there's again, Krishna gives an elaborate, for instance, inclination. If you're inclined to study, that usually means sattva gun, right? If you're inclined to management or military, martial arts, and that's usually an indication of passion, rajagun. If you're inclined towards business, you really get excited and turned on by making money, the whole endeavor of making money. That is usually a combination between passion and ignorance. And if you're inclined towards, nothing for yourself, just trying to get by and, serve the rest of humanity, not really, try to have your own business or try to be a leader or try to be a teacher. And that's usually the predominant influence of tamagun. So all of these influences, these swirls of influence that happen, give us our psychological nature. And it is really subtle, but it is perceptible. It is subtle, but it is perceptible. When you are really influenced by Rajagun, it is perceptible, especially if you're aware that there are modes of material nature. Of course, if you're unaware of such an existence, then you won't know why you have that inclination at all. You won't be able to figure it out at all. But once you make the lifestyle adjustments to put your life in more of a sattvic place, a goodness place, and your mind also will follow suit, then it becomes. Here's a very easy way to feel the modes. Very easy way. How do you feel when you go to the mountains or a quiet beach? You know that feeling? We just went to the mountains in North Carolina, the Smoky Mountains, Great Smoky Mountains. And when you're up there and the air is different, it's cleaner, it's fresher, there's an inclination towards, a different mindset. You hear nature. You hear the birds. You hear the various calls of nature. You take the time to settle down and notice the beauty. We went up to North Carolina specifically to see the color of the leaves changing, because we don't get that down here. And when we were in the Caribbean, when we were in Puerto Rico, the color change was usually the different flowers that were around. But to see a whole thousands and thousands of acres go through this rainbow of change, rainbow of color changes, quite. But imagine how you feel when you do that. Now, let's go to the city. How many of you have been to New York City? I really feel it when I go to New York City, right? You've been in New York City or any real passionate city. You feel like you want to do, you want to go here, you want to go there, a lot of young people go to New York City and Los Angeles. Why? Because they want to make their mark in life. And there's that push that's there. Because city is predominantly rajas, very passionate. And then you go to, within the city, go to a dark bar. And people are drinking and drunk and cursing, and they've got TV blaring or music blaring. Or I don't know, I haven't been to one in so many decades. Smoky, it really has a whole tamasic effect. So you can actually feel the presence. And quite often, if you are cultivating a spiritual life, you don't feel comfortable in those other environments. You want to get back to your more sattvic environment. So that was a kind of an introduction to the 14th chapter to give us a little background reference to gunas. Next week, next Wednesday, we'll begin to read the verses in the 14th chapter. And if does anyone now at this point in time have any questions or comments about what was spoken, any realizations you might have, please feel free. Love to entertain any
I
thoughts.
have a question.
Okay, Sid, shoot.
You know, I see myself as a doer, and there's two branches of that. One is the bhakti doer, and then the other one is doing things in the Maya. And I was just curious, how do you differentiate between the two of them?
Differentiation comes in terms of your intention, your mindset. Because bhakti is the yoga where you act. Bhakti isn't, there is contemplative bhakti. And usually contemplative bhakti is for when a person gets older and is not able to move around. So what do? You chant more, right? You meditate more, you chant more, you study swadhyayas, you study sacred texts more. You do things like that, more contemplative. But when you're in a younger body, younger mindset, then your intention. So you're working, like Bharat is he's a pharmacist. Gokula is a doctor. Irina, I think you said you did makeup. You're a makeup artist?
When I used to live in Las Vegas, I took care of weddings. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
did wedding.
So we all have I'm a retired teacher. We all have our jobs that we do. Now it's the result. What are you doing that for? If you're only doing your job with not a higher purpose, the purpose is to pay the bills, and that falls more into the category of rajas. But if you see, for instance, I hear this from my wife all the time. I don't want to praise her publicly, I know she'll be embarrassed, but I hear her all the time saying, Krishna, please help me, to understand how to heal. It's very much a part of her being and what she does for a living. So that's bhakti. She's doing it, to please Krishna, to please her teacher, her spiritual master. Her intention most of the time is there. And I'm sure Bharat, in terms of what he does, it's a matter of connecting the dots, seeing what you're doing as an offering, and then proving that you see what you do as an offering by actually giving to Krishna or Ram or whomever, you see in terms you identify with as God.
So when for instance, if you work at the food bank,
right,
that is bhakti.
Yeah. Why are you doing it?
For humanity, to help people.
And do you ever talk about the higher principles of life, like Krishna, or you're a soul, or you should chant? You use any opportunity that you have. That kind of helping humanity selflessly, that's a sattvic type of thing. Now you can convert even sattva gun to Shuddha sattva is if you use your opportunities to meet people, to not only give them food for their body and their mind, but give them food for thought.
The soul, yes.
So introduce in the equation, in your discussions, the existence of the soul. I know Gokula comes and she tells me many times, of her conversations with patients. And we're talking about She works at an allopathic clinic as an allopathic doctor, internal medicine, and people come to her because they have headaches or, this problem or that problem. But she turns the opportunity of discussing health with them into an opportunity to also provide food for thought about you as a soul. So I do that too. I go to different places. I have like a network of people that I've met through my son's jujitsu class. Because I go there almost every night that he goes, which is, sometimes 4-5 times a week, and I meet the same people 4 or 5 times a week and spend almost an hour with them. So use that opportunity, to introduce principles of bhakti, principles of vegetarianism. You could start out in health, lifestyle, for instance, diet, for instance. And then as the person shows receptivity, then you can talk about deeper things like the nature of the soul.
Got it.
Does that make that clear?
Yes, actually it does.
Okay, good. Anyone else have any question or comment?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Bharat.
Yes, so like I work for a non-profit organization who serves people who are like mostly below poverty or people who don't have papers and stuff like that. So like when you're working in a health center, people are mentally ill or they're bodily ill and stuff like that. So they are not happy. They are like, if they don't get their medication on time, they get angry and all that. So two things I follow is like tolerance and humbleness. I mean, no matter how angry they are or, just answer them very humbly and very like,
Yes.
passionately. So they half a healing goes there. Like, they realize that I was angry, but this pharmacist is like so kind to me,
Mhm.
Then I also like, first thing we counsel on them on is like diet, exercise, lifestyle. Then we say, okay, then you take medication if those three things are not, enough for you.
Mhm.
So, and then in between, when you get kind of sometimes, you cannot help yourself, that you get agitated, but then you like, like not loudly, but you start chanting Hare Krishna, Mahamantra. And then that brings you back to your own being, calmness and all that. So.
That requires the mindset that you just explained, that in the heat of someone else's fire or anger, that requires self-control. And that self-control is more of a sattvic state of mind, humility, pridelessness, that kind of. So yeah, that's ideal. There may be instances in life where you need to demonstrate tough love because even, it's not getting through to them. But that's also more consistent with your nature, the kind of nature that you have. You seem to be a very, very controlled and humble individual. So what you're doing is you're going deeper into your nature and you're drawing from the qualities of humility and pridelessness in order to control yourself when people are demonstrating anger or frustration or whatever. So that's very good, and that's an indication of the presence of a sattvic mind. Irina, did you have something you wanted to say?
I want to say about New York. To me, you're right. They all active, very fast going on. But in this Rajik place, I can find good stuff like museums or my favorite place, Blue Knot, where Woody Allen played clarinet. jazz music and stuff like that. Maybe it's illusion, but I find sattvic in Raja. I bring, like, I want to try. I'm trying to find
Well, we all,
my
one
path.
thing, Irina, we all have different natures, because we are, according to Ayurveda, we have our Vata nature, our Pitta nature, our Kaphic nature, etc. Which is in correspondence, in correlation with the modes of material nature, and you have your attachments, as do I. I have my attachments, and we all have our particular flavor of attachment. The thing about bhakti, once you study bhakti, is those attachments can be transcendentalized. In other words, if you like music, if music really, really, brings the joy out of your heart, then to get more deeper into kirtan is a way to take that attachment and purify it. So it doesn't mean that immediately you're going to give up the blue note, and whatever little attachments you have, and they're not so significant when you look at how deep-rooted attachments can, and how distracting attachments can become. But what you can do is, I've been in situations with famous people like Woody Allen or Annie Lennox, or different people like that, and I tried to present to them, this sattvic lifestyle, chanting in particular, anyone can relate to. So that is the way I deal with my attachments. I deal with my attachments to that. If it places me in a situation, then I can try to infuse within that situation conversation about the Supreme, conversation about Bhakti Yoga, and in that way, it has the it uplifts me, it keeps me connected to Krishna, and it has a way of connecting those people to a higher consciousness, a higher level of consciousness. So you're saying you find your sattvic and your rajasic. It really means that you have, due to a certain set of conditionings that may be in rajasic, you have your certain set of conditionings, and in each, the drunkard who's totally absorbed in tamagun, when he gets a donation, when someone gives him $5, he's in ecstasy because immediately he runs to the liquor store, and that's his joy in tamagun. And the joy in rajagun may be, something creative. You may have a very creative nature. So your joy, although the creative activity as described in Gita is of the rajas nature, that's where you can get some joy. But the point of it all is that it's temporary. And it's based on sensory input. And as our senses grow old and weak, then there is less of an ability to get the joy out of the more rajasic things, and more or easier to if you are more sattvic, even if your eyesight goes dim, your hearing goes faint, that through like meditation, chanting, that type of thing, going inside, pratyahara, that will provide joy also. So one thing is, don't beat yourself up. Don't think, judge yourself. Just try to understand the value of bhakti and what bhakti is. Bhakti is a conversion of all of your tendencies and talents to the mindset of offering to the Supreme.
Thank
Okay?
you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Very good question, and thank you. So I want you all to have a wonderful upcoming week. I hope it's happy, healthy, and holy. And we'll see you next week, next Wednesday. And until that time, be peaceful, adjust your lifestyle so that you can be sattvic, seek out good association that will have the most amount of influence on you. Thank you once again.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.